To introduce our speaker in a moment, I'll invite club member Jan Levy with Classification Leadership Development to the podium. Jan joined Seattle Rotary in 2013, and in that short time, she served on our program committee. She served as Vice President for Service and as a board member for the club board of directors. Jan has been acquainted for some time with our featured speaker today, and so now to introduce our speaker is our member, Jan Levy.
Thank you, President Jimmy. I first met Trish Millines Dziko in the late 1990s when Leadership Tomorrow had her as a guest speaker for an alumni event. I remember thinking, this woman seems so cool, very determined, and somebody I really wanted to know. Trish was one of Microsoft's early employees. She was able to retire at only 39 to launch her second career. In 1996, she co-founded the Technology Access Foundation, also known as TAF. TAF was an after-school educational program that brought computer training centers, an internship program, and scholarship funds to low-income youth in Seattle. I read in an early interview that Trish said she had always known she wanted to create an organization like TAF. High tech was a predominantly white world, and Trish saw that people of color needed to get into the technology field before it was too late. She launched TAF with $150,000 of her own money, the facilities outfitted with a generous donation of computers from guess who, Bill Gates, her former boss, opened its doors to students in October of 1997. Today, through Trish's leadership, TAF has transitioned from running after-school programs to become a statewide leader in public education, co-managing 2 public schools, partnering with public schools in numerous districts to promote the highest level of student learning, and increasing the number of teachers and leaders of color in Washington state. Trish is a committed, proactive, determined leader. She serves on boards of organizations that focus on children, the community, and education. She and I have had the opportunity to serve on some committees together, and I'm happy to tell you that she's still that really cool woman I met all those years ago. Please join me in giving a warm Seattle 4 welcome to Trish Millines Dziko.
Thank you, Jan. I'm glad I'm still cool. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I need some, can you enable me to share my screen? So while we're waiting, I want to thank you for inviting me to come and speak with you today. I'm going to take you through a short journey through our public education system, how COVID impacted our schools here in Washington state over the last couple of years, and what it takes to truly transform our system and the opportunity we have to do that, and what TAF's role is being a leader in this work. Okay. Can you see this? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
And I advanced it. Can you see that? I want to make sure I have the right thing. Great, thank you.
Yes.
So I want to start real quick about giving you a quick history of our public education system. So our system was built on segregated schools that were designed to prepare students to be either laborers or to attend college. And in 1960, when I was a whopping 3 years old, and my kids still don't believe that this happened in their lifetime, in my lifetime, schools were finally integrated, and Ruby Bridges became the first Black student to integrate schools in the southern states. And while that was a good thing, while integration was a good thing, what ended up happening is that some of the Black schools were closed, and those Black teachers were not able to get jobs in the white schools. And this was the very beginning of the dearth of teachers of color in our public education system. We also use busing for integration in the northern states. And then when you talk about our schools going forward, our modern day schools, under George Bush, we had No Child Left Behind, which was a national test that was implemented because they discovered that there were inequities in our education system. So those of us, students of color, we knew that those inequities were there all along. But all of a sudden, our government decided to care and created these national tests. The problem is there was lots of cheating, and they cheated because they needed to keep that federal, state, and philanthropic funding flowing through the public school system. In 2010, there was an attempt by the Gates Foundation and others to standardize not only the national standards, but also the tests themselves. And they came up with Common Core testing. And this is, they came up with two tests, the PARCC test and the Smarter Balance Assessment, which Washington State hosts here. And then there were the Next Gen Science Standards. But still, at the end of the day, they were national standards that didn't really mean much of anything to determine how kids were learners. So look at our schools today. We have an education ecosystem, not just in Washington State, but nationwide, that's inequitable. We have low expectations of certain demographics of kids. We don't enable parents to contribute to their child's education while they're in school. There are a lot of things that aren't balanced out the way they should be. We have ineffective academic models. We focus too much on standardized tests. We don't feature rigor or student voice and choice. None of the critical thinking, problem solving skills that our students need to have when they leave our school system. Our curriculum delivery lacks relevance. We have teachers who fail to link the relevance of curricular content to the students and what's going on in their school. There's a lot of curricular content that doesn't have people of color in it. Students don't see themselves, students of color don't see themselves in the content, so then they become disengaged. We have a lack of capacity or resources. So there are districts, and we work with those districts, that really want to change, but they don't have the funding, they don't have the resources. Sometimes they don't have the support of their own educators to actually change, because in order to change the system, you have to change yourself. So this is where we are today. And to throw on top of that, COVID comes. And COVID really highlighted the fact that we lack capacity and resources in our schools. So let's look at the COVID impact. So what we learned about families is, number one, 46% of our students are low income and they did not have computers in their homes. So I think many of you remember there was this mad scramble of districts to get the computers into the families' homes, and then the supply chain put a wrinkle in it because every district in the country was looking for additional computers to bring to the home. And now let's say that you had a computer in your home, you got to be one of the lucky ones early on, but you don't have connectivity in your place. So there's no broadband. Then they gave hotspots, and hotspots are extremely slow. And it becomes even more frustrating when you have 5 or 6 learners in your house, all trying to hit the same hotspot at the same time. And some districts were actually only giving 1 computer per household. So now you're not only sharing computers, but you're sharing the hotspot as well. The state testing became an issue. So in 2020, they suspended state testing, but many of the affluent families were really pushing for continuation of state testing because they wanted to get their kids moving on to their college goals, where you had other families were also thinking about the well-being of their students and their wellness, and knowing that there's going to be a long road ahead. So you had that conflict going on around how we should be measuring learning, and then all this panic around learning loss. And finally, there were a lot of reports that parents of color were saying that their children were less anxious because they no longer had to put up with the daily microaggressions that they have at school. They didn't have to fear retribution for things that they didn't even do. So they were learning a little bit better, even though they didn't have all the necessary resources in their homes. And what we learned about schools is that they took on the public health duties. Essentially, the state was mandating that the districts and the schools play the role of public health officials. So they had to create the safe environment, according to the CDA. They had to do contact tracing on top of doing all the things they normally do as administrators. And they weren't given any additional human resources to support them. So that just created a lot more stress. And we lost a lot of administrators throughout our state. They just quit. They just couldn't do it. We focused too much on the adult needs first. So before schools would open, they had to renegotiate with teachers for their contract. There was a lot of valuable time lost there. And we also discovered that many of the teachers lacked the technical skills that they needed to do remote learning. And in fact, they weren't even using the products that the district had asked them to use when they weren't in the remote space. So it made it extra hard for them to implement them during COVID. And then you have principals who were caught in the middle. So they have all these demands coming from on high, and it was constantly changing the school environment for safety, but at the same time, they were expected to keep the same pre-COVID expectations. The biggest struggle was with human resources, where you had a lot of teachers who were out sick, or many teachers left the field altogether, and there weren't enough substitutes to make up for it. So sometimes in some schools, there would be 40% of the teachers would be gone for a single day, and there weren't enough subs to cover. So district personnel would come down to the schools to fill those spots. And then finally, there was this lack of vision for the future. So there was all this talk about, this is a good time to talk about transforming public education, but there was really no time to do it or capacity to do it because of everything else that's listed in 1 through 5 here. So here we are. Everybody's waiting to get public schools back to where they were. And the way they were was not ideal for most of our students. But that window is not closed yet. We still have opportunities to change. We got to make that first step first. And I'm going to cover for you the key components to transforming a school. TAF has identified these core components through our work since 2008. We're partnering with schools and co-managing schools. So philosophy and culture are basically belief and behavior, and I'm going to cover these in a little more detail. Pedagogy is about how you teach. Diversity of staff is making sure that we have representation, teachers of color for students of color, and we need to have curricular content that is culturally, communally relevant. And then the final piece is expanding the community to show that kids still learn outside of school, and we can bring the community in to show the kids what could be and what's going on and the path that they could be taking. So let's start with philosophy. Schools don't really talk about this, and then they tend to go along with the district philosophy, and it doesn't make any sense because, you know, when people choose a school, they want to know what that school is about. And so it would be interesting for those of you who have school-age kids or grandkids, it would be interesting if their parents would ask, what is the philosophy of this school? And I bet they would get many different answers, or maybe no answer at all, because it's just not something that is talked about. But whatever the philosophy is, every adult, including the front desk, the janitor, all the district personnel, the admin, the teachers, everybody that's in that school needs to adhere to the philosophy. And culture is basically behavior, right? When we start thinking about, in my view, we owe every student the opportunity to be the best that they can be. And they can't be if we have different standards for different kids. So basically, if we're academically tracking or treating different kids differently based off of gender, race, etc. Because if we're doing that, we're essentially judging them. And if I judge you as an adult in your school, I can't teach you. And I hope that's like core to us. I cannot judge you and teach you at the same time. Learning is a process and it's not a product. And students and teachers need that time to prepare for learning and doing the work. And if I'm judging you, I'm not giving that time. I'm just brushing through, making assumptions about what you know and what you need to know and how you learn. We need to move the kids through the standards when they're ready, not because it says when you're 5 years old, you need to know these 5 things. And if you don't know these 5 things in reading, then we're just going to move on anyway. We need to give kids time to actually meet those standards. And if we have a culture that says that, a culture that says we're going to give that time, then the pedagogy will follow suit. How we teach will follow suit. All right, how we deliver lessons is key to learning. Right now, schools use packaged curriculum that they assume hit all the learning standards. But that's not necessarily true. And what this does is it prevents students from thinking through really complex problems, real world problems, and going through a deep learning of the standards. And, many of us don't do well on standardized tests. It doesn't mean that we don't know things. It doesn't mean that we are incapable of knowing things. It just means that we don't do well on timed, high pressure tests. And really the best way to assess students is through performance or competency-based tests. And these are assessments that are actually based on a lot of things. It could be paper tests, it could be tasks, it could be verbal readback of knowledge. There are a lot of different ways that you can assess student learning. And it takes away that pressure of these timed tests and things that don't really measure anything about the learner. But to go in this direction, it really requires a lot of professional development for teachers because it's not really part of their training and it's certainly not part of their work as teachers. And over time, as they get set in their ways on how they teach and how they assess, it makes it even harder for us to kind of back them out a little bit and teach them to know their students a little better so that they can create more effective assessments of learning. Now, having a diverse staff is super important. Our schools are not great environments for teachers of color because there are so few of them. We have about, we're doing a little bit better, but about 85% of our teachers in our state are white, and over 50% of the students are of color. And when you look in the Puget Sound region here, that number is more like 77% of the students are of color and 78% of the teachers are white. And when you have a mismatch like that, it really takes away the opportunity for students to connect with somebody that comes from a similar culture, who understands who they are, who understands what content is interesting to them that they can connect to. So we want to make sure we have a diversity of staff in every school. And then the content itself needs to be representative of students' cultures and their communities and their interests. We need to take that time to help the kids see the world through multiple cultures. And it's not just important for students of color to be exposed to curricular content that they can connect to. It's really important for white students as well to see that there's a whole nother world that they haven't been taught about, because our curricular content in our schools is so focused on a Eurocentric view of the world. So here we have an opportunity to really teach our teachers how to find that content, to have a catalog of content that's statewide so that teachers can just go and grab it. And then also teach kids how to dig a little deeper through that content to learn more. And finally, talking about the expanded community. And one of the things that's important is to show kids that there is knowledge beyond the school walls, that there are people in their community that can bring a lot of good life experiences, a lot of professional experiences, that they can see the possibilities for themselves. It also benefits teachers because teachers and administrators are charged with teaching kids to be something, right? And it would be good to know what those options are and to understand what the kind of skills and competencies students need along the way to pursue those types of professions. And really giving families an opportunity to participate in learning as well is very important. And when we eliminate the outside community, we are basically putting our children in a box. And telling them that all of their knowledge comes from that person in front of the school and all the other people in the school, and never shall it come from anywhere else. So TAF is working on all of these components. And our mission basically is this: we collaborate with public education as well as universities. Nobody can do this on their own, but we try to bring our assets to the table and and have the school system bring their assets to the table for the benefit of student and teacher learning. So our theory of action is through this partnership, we're going to produce students who are socially conscious and self-aware, who are armed with those 21st century skills that we keep saying they need to succeed, and then get them in a space to be positioned to create a world they envision. And I notice none of these say anything about STEM. It's basically about creating students who can think for themselves. No matter what profession they're in, they're going to need those kind of skills, those 21st century skills, to solve problems and to be successful. And every school should aspire to create these kind of opportunities for students. We do this through our 4 programs here, and we have our TAF Academies, which are our 2 schools that we co-manage. One is in Federal Way and one is in Seattle. We have our Teacher Institute, where we bring teachers from all over the state who are interested in learning how we teach and how we work our schools. And they come to us in the summer, and now we're starting to open it up during the school year. We have our Transform Ed program, and that's for us to partner with public schools at a lower level than we do with our co-managed schools. We give them an instructional coach for the full year for 5 years, and we take them through this transformative process so that at the end, all 6 of those elements that I talked about, you can walk into their schools and you can see it. And then finally, our Network for EdWork is about working with teachers of color to provide these multiple pathways to leadership, as well as making sure we retain these teachers. And we have a new program called Ally Engagement for our white leaders, because over 85% of our public schools are led by white principals. And principals are in control of the culture and the environment of their schools. And we need them to understand the importance of not only just recruiting teachers of color, but retaining them by creating environments where they can actually thrive. So the big question I have is, do we have the political will to do something really big, to get in this place where we're on a continuous cycle of recognizing and unlearning and replacing these institutional practices that undereducate and harm our students? We continue to do this. We keep holding on to them. I'm not sure why. I guess it's because it makes people comfortable. But there are 2 big efforts that I think that can make a huge impact nationwide. One is to take the tens of millions of dollars that we spend every year on our standardized tests, and we do here in Washington, and invest most of that in a teacher professional development program so that they can continuously hone their skills, and then also invest in a national effort to curate projects and authentic assessment models. So, and pay the teachers for that, so that we can move the ball forward on authentic assessments instead of kind of creeping along like we are right now. And then the second thing is to normalize racial equity. We talk a lot, the districts talk about racial equity a lot. They put people through training, but the practices are not there. And it's really a journey, and it takes time, but it has to be normalized as part of daily practice of administrators, the teachers, and the staff at the district level as well as the school level. And then I'm going to leave you with this. Brazilian educator Paulo, I think, really hit the nail on the head with this quote: "There is no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument to bring about conformity or freedom." And I actually think we should be giving our children freedom. Thank you, and I'll take questions now.
Thank you so much, Trish. That's awesome. I'm going to invite you to take off your slides, and then we can all see you. And then I've got a lot of questions to throw at you. We probably got a good few minutes. So thank you so much. Really very impressive. I had no idea. So it's always good to learn, right?
Yes.
All right, first question, which now I've lost. First question, I have now lost. Really? Oh my goodness. I was all ready. Now I've forgotten. Oh, excuse me. Has TAF done any studies regarding tribal communities and technology access? I know there is a big push right now to establish more reliable connectivity for these communities.
Yeah, we have not, but Equity in Education Coalition is doing that work. They've taken on that work with some state funding, and they're focusing on tribal communities and other communities of color. We've moved away from like that pure technology, and what we focus on are our schools that we partner with. We would love to partner with some tribal schools. We have been approached by a few, and I hope within the next 3 years or so that we end up having a partnership.
Yeah. Each of us votes in different school districts. What actions do you recommend we take to advocate locally and enhance access for our own districts?
I think really before you vote, having a really good understanding of the folks who are running and what their intentions are and how it lines up with what the district wants to do. And that actually doesn't really happen in many places. You know, we vote for folks, they talk about what they want to do, but then they get on the board and it doesn't align at all with where the district is trying to go. And that just makes it hard. And in places particularly like Seattle, it creates a lot of conflict between the staff and the board itself.
I'm curious, do other states do better than us? Are they worse than us? Are we in the middle of like how we look after everyone in school?
We're kind of at the bottom. We're at the bottom of per student funding. We're at the bottom of college attainment. We're certainly at the bottom in terms of representation for students of color, having teachers of color represent. But, you know, and it makes it worse when you think about how much money and how many resources we have in this state and how we focus on technology as our industry, yet we don't do the work to make sure that our own students in our own backyard are prepared to take any of those jobs. They only have to be tech heavy, right? The tech companies have lawyers, they have marketers, they have digital content people, they have a lot of different people. And the money is not going into the system, as well as the political will to do the right work is not happening yet.
Yeah, it looks like a big disconnect.
Yes.
Are there any quick success stories that you can relay from graduates?
Sure. I mean, you know, we have 98% of our students graduate on time. 91% of them go to college. We have students from, you know, way back that are directors in their companies, that are entrepreneurs. We have a couple professors, a couple doctors, pharmacists. They're going out and getting careers, and, you know, our earlier kids are actually in their 40s now, early 40s, late 30s, which makes me feel super, super old. But I'm happy for them because they have shown that the work that we do brings on generational change. So they're living better than how they grew up, and they're giving back to their communities.
Yeah, perfect. That's cool. And you don't look old, so it's okay. Please describe what TAF is doing now at Washington Middle School in Seattle and how it's different from what was done before the program was instituted.
Yeah, so Washington Middle School in particular was one of the largest highly capable pathways. So students who are in the highly capable program test in first grade, and from first grade all the way through 8th grade, they come in the same cohort and they get advanced learning. And our model does not segregate kids. We don't believe in segregating kids. We believe that everybody can learn from everybody else in the classroom, whether you're on the far ends of the spectrum or in the middle. And so one of the first things we said before we said yes is that we need to be able to integrate kids in every possible way. What that has done has changed how the resources have gone to the general education kids, because prior to that, they weren't getting those resources that they needed. All the resources were going to the highly capable students. The other thing that's different is we group kids into houses. So I don't know if you know that a typical middle school or high school teacher has 120 to 180 students every year. And here we are telling them you need to build relationships, right? But we have a model that we call houses, where there is one math, one science, one humanities teacher for a group of 75 to 90 kids. And 90 is really a lot for us, but 75 is ideal. And they're with those kids for the entire year. And then those kids see their other peers, and when they go to lunch and when they go to electives, they take electives together. But this house model enables teachers to get to know students better. It also enables them to share the load of talking to families and bringing folks into the school to support the kids. So it's, and we're a project-based learning model. So all of those teachers have to get together to create interdisciplinary projects for the students. And it's really changed for the general ed students. It really changed how they see themselves as learners. And for the kids who are in highly capable, for many of them, it takes the pressure off of having to compete with each other to get that A and to get that advanced class when you're not quite ready. Because we move kids along in the time that they are ready, not because we say, you know, this month you should know this, and if you don't, we're going to move you forward. So we're only in year 2. And it feels good. Year 2 felt much better than year 1. We started in the pandemic online. So that's a rough way to start a partnership.
You can only go up from there, right?
It can only go up from there. Yeah, absolutely.
Trish, thank you so much for being here today. We've run out of time for Q&A, but if you've got a minute, there's a lot of questions piling up. And if you've got a minute to even try and answer some of those just in the chat, that would be ideal. And if not,
absolutely,
we can send these to you. All right, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. Great conversation. Thank you so much for being here today, Jan. Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And then on behalf of Seattle Rotary, we have donated money to Harvest Against Hunger, who have donated 600 meals, 600 healthy meals to people throughout the community on your behalf. So thank you so much for being here today. Fantastic. All right. A little thank you going out to Liz Powell, as a gold sponsor with Remax on market. And as always, Bob Alexander, thank you so much to both of you.